Morning. So last week Libby kicked off our new series and she used the phrase neighbours are for life, not just for lockdown. And it comes from this key thing that we have, this key mission of ours, which is to love God and to love people. And it says in Matthew's Gospel in chapter 22 and verses 37 to 39, it says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind, and love your neighbour as yourself. And it's this text that we want to unpack a bit over the next few weeks. So how do we go about this thing of consistently loving our neighbours? This morning I want to focus on one way that we can do that, and there's nothing rocket science about it. Anyone can do it, young or old. And in fact, particularly in the initial stages of lockdown, there was this widely reported phenomenon of it happening all over the country, and it's just called being kind. I'm sure that you will have heard of numerous stories, and you will know of them yourselves, of just the increased sense of community spirit that people experienced right at the start of lockdown. And people, who've lived on the same street for years and years suddenly found new ways of connecting with each other, checking in on each other, doing people's shopping, giving people a call. All sorts of things were going on as people looked out for each other and were kind to each other. And, in England, just this week, government guidance has changed, has been tweaked once again. But the danger is that as we come out of lockdown, with all the kind of ups and downs of that when it comes to connecting with our neighbours, people might go back to life as it was before, with perhaps more isolation from those around them. That's the danger. And so the phrase that we want to keep looking at over the next few weeks is neighbours are for life, not just for lockdown. And last week, Libby mentioned the book, which is called 42 Seconds, and it's written by somebody called Carl Medeiros. And he studied the interactions of Jesus as they're recorded in the Bible, and he concluded that on average, Jesus' interactions with people lasted only 42 seconds. But the impact that they had on people was life-changing. So over the next few weeks, we're going to base our talks on this Carl Medeiros book. So if you want to get it, do just check it out. But what we're going to do this morning is just kick off with something that's really simple, and it's about being kind. So if you don't know Jesus yet, I would encourage you to find out more about him. Maybe to download a Bible app and check out one of the following books in the Bible: Matthew, Mark, Luke or John. You can find those kind of about 2/3 of the way through the Bible. And you can look at the person of Jesus. And if we follow Jesus, we want to be like him. And he was extraordinarily kind. So being kind is a good way to start if we want to follow Jesus and be like Jesus. And it might sound obvious, but it's not. Certainly before lockdown, people have forgotten how to be kind. We are too caught up in our own lives to think about other people. That's often what happens with us. You just need to look at the migrant crisis, which is coming to the fore again in the news again recently. And it shows, doesn't it, that actually people are inherently looking after themselves instead of looking after other people. And I know that when it comes to immigration, it's a complex issue. There's a whole load of logistics around it. But on the other hand, it's actually quite simple. If any of us were fleeing from war or conflict or danger, we would want to be able to go somewhere safe and not be turned away. We would want to be met with kindness. And what we see that's prevalent in Western culture is that too often kindness is not ranked very highly at all. There was a study, a Harvard study, and 80% of the teenagers in this study said that achievement and happiness were more important than caring for others. Now, I don't know about you, but I find that quite scary if that's what some of the teenagers, or certainly the participants in that study, if that's what they were actually thinking, because they are adults of the future and who will influence their communities. So in a world where our values are generally skewed, kindness has to compete with a whole range of other things. And so much so that when kindness actually happens, it surprises people, which is what has happened, particularly at the start of lockdown. People don't expect it. It catches people's attention because it's something different to what normally happens. And people have been discovering the power of this through lockdown. They've been discovering how kindness brings connection and relationship, and it opposes isolation. And that's because it's based on love. Kindness communicates the very essence of God. So what are some of the things that compete with kindness? What stops us or what gets in the way? And there are several things. Firstly, productivity. So let me paraphrase that. Will there be anything to show for it? Will I still be able to get done everything I need to get done if I show kindness to that person? Also, efficiency. Will this be a good use of my talents or time and resources? Time management is another factor. I've got things to do. I've just not got enough time. Justice. Do they actually deserve it? Do they deserve my kindness? We kind of make an internal decision as to whether someone else is worthy of our time and energy and care. Upward mobility, will it benefit me? Will it make me look good? And then status, that gets in the way as well. Is this something that I'm supposed to do? Couldn't it be someone else doing it? Is it right that I'm to do something for this person? And as we just think about those words and some of those questions, they just sound really selfish, really kind of self-absorbed. We are too often preoccupied with our own schedules, our own needs, and our own rights. Too often these are at the forefront of our minds, and they distract us from the needs of other people around us, and they dull us to the voice of Jesus and his ideas for any particular moment. So self-preoccupation is the biggest obstacle we need to overcome in order to grow in kindness. And when you get to know this person called Jesus, you get to see that his ideas are way better than ours. Jesus tells us about this different way to live. Just this past week, Soccer Aid was on the television, and some of the people in our family were watching it. And if you've not heard of it before, it's a kind of celebrity football match where there's professional footballers and people from the world of entertainment, and they play a football match, and people donate to UNICEF, the global children's charity. And this year's match kicked off with a poignant poem that reflected on the shared experience that we've all had during this health crisis. And there was a particular line in this poem that struck me, and it was repeated several times as like a refrain during the poem. And it said this: love won't be locked down. At the end of the day, you cannot contain it, but at the same time, we can practice love. We can practice it through being kind. Kindness is not passive. It's not neutral. It's not a way of thinking. It is active. It's a way of being towards other people. And it happens through embracing just everyday interactions. So we have to be willing to be interrupted, to lay down our agendas and to consider the person in front of us. Whether that be the person that we're just walking past, someone who services in a shop, someone we sit next to on the bus, that person might actually just be at the forefront in the mind of God in that particular moment. So let's be encouraged to maybe put our phones down and make space for holy interruptions during our days. So just think for a minute about maybe all the people you've interacted with this morning or this week. I'm not sure when you're listening to it, but just think, cast your mind back to the people that you've interacted with, whether they were long interactions or just very brief encounters. People you might have exchanged words with, whether verbally or maybe on a text message, any kind of interactions. Sometimes we think that these crossing of paths are not very important. But what about if every single interaction we have with people is? That's the question I want us to think about. Jesus talked about being kind or doing good, and it oozed out of him in his actions, like absolutely everywhere he went, whatever he did. He said, do to others as you would have them do to you. And he talked about that for people who are your enemies, as well as people who are your friends. In fact, he said, if you're just being good to your friends, then that's nothing special really, because anyone can do that. So how can we do this thing called doing love or doing kindness? How can we be kind? Because if we follow Jesus, we want to become more like him and reflect him to others. And you might think, when it comes to being kind, surely we teach that to our 2-year-olds, our 3-year-olds, our 4-year-olds. And it's absolutely true, we do. But inherently, we can be selfish people. And so we need to keep on learning. We need to keep on practicing how to be kind. Now, for some of us, that might be easier than others. We have different life experiences, different characters, different personalities and giftings, but we can all practice this thing. And I truly believe that if we consistently and actively practice kindness and are kind to those around us, it has the power to transform our communities. So we're just going to look this morning at 5 really simple, very practical things that we can practice about being kind. And the first thing is this: say hello. If you're walking along the street, have you ever done that thing of, you see a survey person kind of walking towards you and you just think, I haven't got time of day for this. And so you pretend to look at your phone, or you check your watch, or something that's going to mean you don't give them eye contact. What about if we actually chose to say hello to that person, even if it was a kind of, sorry, I've not got enough time, but, I hope you have a good day, something like that. Have you ever walked past somebody who maybe is homeless on the street and not given them eye contact or said hello just because you've got other things to be doing? If you look at Jesus, he didn't fail to acknowledge people. He noticed people. He called people by name. His first followers were just this band, this motley crew of just ordinary people. Jesus said hello, and as a result of that, they followed him and their lives were changed. Let's look at one of Jesus's interactions with somebody you can find in the Bible. He's called Zacchaeus, and you can find it in Luke chapter 19 and verses 1 to 6. And this is what it says. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he couldn't see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. And what we know about Zacchaeus is that he was this thief, he was a cheat, he was someone who exploited other people and so was despised by those around him. So crowds of people, coming to see Jesus, and because Zacchaeus wants to get a better view, he shins up the tree and Jesus spots him up the tree and he basically says, hello. He calls him by his name. I know who you are. Come on, let's eat together. And then if you read the story further, then Zacchaeus' life was never the same again. He was so impacted by Jesus that he gave lots of his wealth away. And it all started with Jesus saying hello and saying his name. Secondly, another way we can practice being kind, let's acknowledge those who are often overlooked. Jesus did this all the time. There are countless examples in the Bible. And I think one of the most compelling things about Jesus is that he looked at people. He acknowledged people. He didn't pass them by. In Luke chapter 8 and verses 40 to 48, this is the story that unfolds. Now when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. Then a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me." And then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. And then he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." Jesus acknowledged people, women, children, the homeless, the sick, outsiders, criminals, the people you weren't supposed to talk to or even notice. He paid attention. In the bit that we've just read, Jesus was spoken to by someone really, really important, but first of all, he notices the woman. A woman who was trying to hide herself away, a woman who would have been pushed to the outskirts of society because of her illness, because of her gender, because of her she was just poor. She'd spent everything she had on trying to get better. And because of her illness, she was bleeding, so she was classed as unclean. It was she was like one of the lowest of the low. And so she seeks Jesus, and actually, as she does that, she tries to be unnoticed at the time, but Jesus notices her. He acknowledges her. And as she is physically restored in that encounter, as well, kind of emotionally, she would have been healed by Jesus. Someone had seen her and noticed her, saw her. So think to yourselves, who do we sometimes overlook? Who might we be able to say hello to and interact with that we might ordinarily pass by? Another way to be kind is just to ask another question when we're having conversation with people, not to try and wrap up the conversation as quickly as possible, but to just give people time and attention. When we're talking and listening to people, we so often try to give direct answers. If you look at Jesus, he often didn't answer many questions. He often actually asked questions. He asked a question back. Or sometimes he told a story that just puzzled people a little bit and got them thinking. The crux of it was that Jesus engaged in conversation with people. It was about relationship. And Medeiros in his book says, conversation leads to relationship. A lecture, not so much. It's about relationship and valuing people. So here's some of the questions that Jesus asked people. I'm not going to go into all the detail of them. I'm just going to throw them out there for you to check out maybe and have a look. He says to somebody in John 5 verse 6, he says, "Do you want to get well?" In Mark 10 verse 51, he says, "What do you want me to do for you?" In John 21 verse 17, he says, "Do you love me?" In John 8 verse 10, he says, "Where are your accusers?" And in Matthew 16 verse 15, he says, "And who do you say I am?" People want to feel heard. They want to know we're actually interested in them. They don't necessarily want a slick answer. And sometimes what people offer us is a glimpse to look beyond the question they're asking and discern what's really going on for them underneath. An angry kind of, why is there so much suffering in the world? Which is actually a really good question to be asking right at this moment, and not one that we could shrug off quickly. That question might actually mean, why is this person that I love suffering so much? Why are they in so much pain? The question is actually deeply personal, but it requires us to notice that. And as we listen and ask questions, what happens is that we show concern and care. That's the important bit. Asking questions in conversation is not this kind of robotic process, as if we're kind of just going down the next question on a questionnaire. Or worse still, it's not about trying to reel somebody in. We must let the conversation just naturally unfold. And there's this kind of give and take, this natural rhythm to conversation. You ask questions and someone else asks questions of you. This kind of natural rhythm. And Madeira says, all of us yearn for someone to care enough to ask us good, deep questions that will draw out the best from within us. It's a way of being kind. Then there's doing something small. Jesus said this in Matthew 13, verses 31 to 32. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it's the smallest of all seeds, yet when it grows, it's the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds come and perch in its branches. God's kingdom starts with things that are seemingly small and insignificant, and they can have huge impacts. I wonder if there's been a time when somebody's simple act of kindness had a larger than life, a larger than visible impact on your life. I've certainly experienced that. There's an example of something just recently that's happened in our street. We've done lots of things with our neighbours in the past. Sometimes just small acts of random kindness. Sometimes they've not been so random, they've been quite specific. But just over the years, just have been, building relationships with our neighbours. And the other week, there's one particular couple who we've not had too much to do with. We touched base with them during lockdown, and they were both shielding and we offered some support, but they had family nearby. But every time we've done something in the street, we haven't had a huge amount of interaction with them or kind of anything from them. But this time last year, they left some apples out the front of their house because they've got an apple tree in their garden, and they just had a note on it saying, take some if you want some. So at that time I took some, I made some apple cake, and I just popped it round there. I said, oh, thanks so much, we took some of your apples, here's some apple cake, do you want some? That was about a year ago. And then in between we've done other things, again not heard much from them. And then a couple of weeks ago I was out, and the man from the couple just popped around a bag of apples, same time of year, and like a massive bag. And he said, oh, I know you took some last year, just wondered if you wanted some again. So this time I made another apple cake and I popped it round. And on this occasion, I was invited in for a good kind of 45 minutes, and we just chatted, him and his wife. I heard a lot of their life story, a lot of what had been going on for them, and it was a really precious moment of connection. And that's just come out of small acts of kindness. They're doable things, they're not big things, they're just small. Finally, say hello to people's children. Jesus had time for children, and his disciples often thought it was strange, but he said, let the children come to me. You can read that in a passage in Mark 10 verses 13 to 16. Jesus knew how to interact with all sorts of people. And as soon as you kind of ask about people's children, you remember their names, what they're up to, just to kind of connect. When you talk about them or their grandchildren, people's faces light up. It blesses the children themselves when you spend time with them, and it also blesses the parents too. So there are 5 simple things that we can practice, ways of being kind. I'm going to wrap up very, very shortly, but I just want to touch on 2 other things very quickly. The first being Love Chelmsford. It's coming up soon, end of September, beginning of October. It's a time when we focus for a week. Each small group has a budget, and we focus on blessing our communities, being kind to our communities. Okay, it doesn't mean we're only kind during that week, once in a year, once every term, but it means we particularly focus during that week. So get your ideas, get your thinking going, get asking your small group leaders. If you're not yet in a small group, then catch up with or get in touch with us so we can get you in touch with a small group and get you plugged in there and blessing our community. There's so many ways that we've done this over the last few years, and with some amazing kind of interactions, connections that have happened. So get stuck in there. And the second is Grow Baby. It's a key project that we have here at Chelmsford Vineyard for blessing people in our community, for being kind. It's where we give away free clothing, good quality clothing and baby basics to families for children who are aged 5 and under, just for free. And ordinarily we would meet in a cafe once a month and have a kind of a drop-in thing where people can hang out, children can play, we can chat with people, have a cup of tea and some toast, and people can select clothing. That's having to be done slightly differently at the moment because of social distancing guidelines. But as I was thinking about Groby, I was thinking actually it incorporates all 5 of those things about being kind. It incorporates saying hello, acknowledging people who perhaps might sometimes be overlooked. It involves asking another question and engaging conversation. It involves doing something small, the act of giving away clothes, and it involves saying hello to people's children. So Grow Baby is an expression of kindness in our community, and it's a bit Jesus-y because of that. And we've had to adapt what we're doing, but plans are afoot, and we're excited about the future of Grow Baby, and there will be opportunities for you to get involved. So watch this space, a practical way of practicing those 5 things of being kind, of loving our neighbours. So that's what we're going to practice this week. We would love to hear your stories. We'd love to hear some of the things that go on as a result of talking about this and practicing these things. So I'm going to stop there and we're going to pray. Lord Jesus, thank you that your heart is kind. It is kind towards us and it is kind towards others. And Lord, we want to get better at being like you. We want to get better at following you and your spirit filling us up and the love and kindness we experience from you spilling out to other people. So Lord, you come and fill us up in order that we might be kind and spread your love to others. Show others who you are, Jesus. So Holy Spirit, come fill us up now. And it might be that as you're listening, you might think, I've never actually experienced the kindness of God. And if you would like to, we would love to introduce you to Jesus this morning. Just get in touch with us and we'll do that. And you can begin that journey of experiencing his kindness for yourself. But we experience his kindness in order to give it away to others. So come, Lord, bless us and bless our communities. Amen.